Hi everybody, it's Scott, back with another episode of the Sengoku series. It's another warm day here in Washington, D.C., and I just wanted to make another video, jump right back in, and pick up where my last video left off and continue this series on Hideyoshi, the second of the three Great Unifiers of the Sengoku period. And there's really two themes that I want to touch on today when I talk about Hideyoshi. The first being just how short a period of time we're talking about when we talk about him, because it's really not a whole lot of time before he sort of rises to power, asserts himself as the hegemonic power in Japan, and then the Toyotomi clan basically fades away and is supplanted by the Tokugawa. So, from 1582, Nobunaga's assassination at Honnoji. And I want to apologize, in my last episode I called it Honnoji Castle when Ji means temple, so Honnoji is obviously a temple. My bad on that one. So 1582, Nobunaga's assassinated. We're only up to 1584 after the Komaki campaign, when Hideyoshi can really focus on finishing the unification of Japan. I'm going to wrap this video up around 1590 when that finishes. And so from 1590 to Hideyoshi's death in 1598, the Battle of Sekigahara, where the Tokugawa basically beat the forces aligned with preserving the Toyotomi status quo, occurs in 1600. And that's pretty much really, the Toyotomi aren't officially wiped out until I believe 1615 or 1616 during the siege of Osaka. But basically, Sekigahara is really when it's decided that the Tokugawa are going to rule, not the Toyotomi. So from 1582 to 1598, when Hideyoshi dies, that's really only 16 years. And if you cut it down to when he finishes unification, which is 1590, with the defeat of the Hojo at Odawara, that's really only 8 years really of Hideyoshi being the sole guy on top. So that's the first thing I really want to stress, is that this is really, in a time period, the Sengoku Jidai, which stretches over, decades and decades, arguably centuries if you consider the Onin War to be the start of the Sengoku Jidai, then, it's pretty significant that we're only talking about, a little more than 15 years or even less than 10 years, really, where Hideyoshi is on top by himself, solo, with his clan likely to be the hegemonic power going forward in Japan. And the second thing I want to stress, the other big theme of this episode, is the weak federation of Daimyo that Hideyoshi builds. So we talked in the last video, at the end of the Komaki campaign, Hideyoshi reached a settlement with Ieyasu, where they basically had a stalemate. Technically Hideyoshi could have continued the campaign and beat the Tokugawa, but he decided not to. He decided, instead of having this protracted bloody war, he would just reach a settlement where Ieyasu could keep what he had, and in addition he wouldn't have to contribute any soldiers to the rest of Hideyoshi's unification wars, with the exception of the Hojo in 1590, but again, that's the last one. So directly after that, Hideyoshi attacks Shikoku Island, which is just off of south-central Honshu, the main island of Japan, and the Shikoku Island had just been recently unified, or rather conquered, by Chosakabe Motochika. He had been based in Tosa province in the southeast part of Shikoku, but he had brought the whole of the island under his control, only for Hideyoshi to show up in 1585 and be like, well, sorry, I'm going to take this from you now. But he does something interesting, which is that instead of totally confiscating the lands belonging to the Chosakabe, he lets them keep Tosa province. He takes everything else from them, but he leaves them their traditional power base in Tosa. And this is a pattern that continues, because in 1587, when Hideyoshi conquers Kyushu, which is another big island off the western tip of Honshu. It's pretty much, almost conquered completely by the Shimazu clan based out of Kagoshima in the south of Kyushu. Again, the Shimazu put up some perfunctory resistance, just like the Chosokabe did when the Hideyoshi's invasion force lands. They actually do pretty well. The Shimazu are actually probably one of the best strategists of this period. With all the love that, for example, Takeda Shingen gets, you should really look at the Shimazu for some really, genius strategies for resisting superior forces. But long story short, the Shimazu are also defeated. They submit, but they're allowed to keep Kagoshima, and they go on to play a very important role in Japanese history, becoming relevant again at the very close of the Tokugawa shogunate in the 19th century. So, why is this important? Well, Nobunaga followed a pretty clear pattern of he would ruthlessly destroy his enemies, utterly leave them, in waste, and he wouldn't really be interested in a settlement with them. He would just defeat them and then distribute their land to his top generals, his little clique of his most trusted retainers. But Hideyoshi takes a different approach. He struck a peace deal with the Mori when he learned of Nobunaga's death. He reaches an agreement with Tokugawa Ieyasu after the Komaki campaign. Same thing with the Chosokabe and Shikoku and the Shimazu. And rather than fight these long, drawn-out wars where he utterly destroys these regional powers in Chugoku, Shikoku, Kyushu, wherever, he lets them, hold on to a little corner of land, and basically tries to integrate them into the new national, government he's building with him at the top. And really, I want to stress that this is sort of a weak federation. He's treating these regional powers, these regional daimyo, as vassals, similar to how any daimyo would treat significant landholders under his domain. He's basically asking for their loyalty in exchange for them getting to keep what they have, and sort of, the promise of protection that, he will honor what they have as long as they honor him as sovereign. And this is, very different from how the Tokugawa end up ruling during their shogunate, where power is much more centralized in the hands of the shogun. It's a lot less of an ordeal to really reduce a house or just totally decimate a house, like what happens to the Fukushima clan after Ieyasu takes over in 1600. Hideyoshi really rules through this idea of, like, let's have peace and security, but I'm not going to dramatically remake these different corners of Japan. I'm really more interested in just having a unifying central power. And so in 1585, that's really when he becomes the imperial regent. He doesn't become shogun himself, but he gains the title of Kampaku, and it's really unprecedented for someone who's of such humble origins. He's from peasant stock, remember, to hold this title, which is an imperial court title. And imperial court titles are reserved for the imperial nobility, families who can really trace their origins to the imperial bloodline. And so for the nobility to allow Hideyoshi to take this title of imperial regent really shows how desperate they are to work with a unifying force and to bring some order and peace to Japan after so many years of civil war and strife. It really benefits them if there is a central authority recognized in the country, that being the imperial court. So they rally around Hideyoshi, even though, normally, of course, they wouldn't have nothing to do with this, jumped up peasant guy. And to add sort of a veneer of respectability to this, Kono Sakihisa, who's an imperial noble, adopts Hideyoshi into his family. The Kono are descended from the Fujiwara clan, which is one of the most prestigious noble houses in Japan. From ancient times up until the contemporary period, the modern age, the Fujiwara and the Kono are still relevant in Japanese politics. And Toyotomi, or Hideyoshi, for his part, is willing to play along. He adopts the last name Toyotomi, which means bountiful minister. And this sort of indicates to the imperial court that he's going to play along. He's going to be a prosperous ruler on behalf of the court, using its authority to project his own power across all of Japan. So it's an interesting sort of politics that he plays with the court, just like Nobunaga did, and Hideyoshi, for his part, does very well in sort of these court politics at the time. So I talked about the Kyushu conquest in 1587, and then in 1588, there's the famous sword hunt. Hideyoshi orders that all the weapons belonging to the peasants, to the commoners in Japan, are to be confiscated and melted down into a giant Buddha statue. And why does he do this? Why does he order the sword hunt? And really it's to put a freeze on the sort of social mobility that ironically really benefited him the most. He came from non-samurai status. He rose up to become a general and then a successor to Oda Nobunaga. But by preventing any other peasant from taking up arms and becoming a leader of men in this way, he really makes the peasants have to choose, like, am I going to be a farmer, or am I going to try to pursue a career as a samurai, as a man of arms? And a lot of them choose to become farmers because it's more reliable as a source of income, as a livelihood. Peace seems to be on the horizon. It's not totally settled yet, but with Hideyoshi, first Nobunaga, and now Hideyoshi, in the process of unification. Why not put away your weapons, put away your swords, your spears, and take up the plowshare and become a farmer and support yourself and your family. But there are a number of those who choose to become samurai, whether it's the lowest rank of ashigaru, like a foot soldier. But to do so would mean having to move to a castle town to take on a stipend and live off your stipend in service to a lord. And as it becomes more clear in peacetime, it's actually first samurai aren't that useful in peacetime, but as you have a centralized power that can dismantle and does dismantle clans as it sees fit, you're going to end up with a lot of masterless samurai, ronin, palling around, which is a problem in itself, as we'll see. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 1590, that's when Odawara Castle happens. That's when the Hojo are the last real holdouts, refusing to bend the knee to Hideyoshi. The Date clan, the Uyusuji clan, these other clans in eastern Japan have all gone through the formality of showing their loyalty to Hideyoshi. The Hojo in the Kanto region do not do so. They hold up in Odawara Castle, which is this famous castle complex of theirs in which they resisted invasions by the Takeda and Uyusuji Kenshin. But of course, Hideyoshi's no fool. When he shows up to besiege Odawara, he basically brings the city with him. He anticipates the long siege, so he brings merchants, women, prostitutes, basically, entertainment for the men. There's lots of food, so there's really no concern about morale or supplies, running out. They can go for the siege as long as it takes, and of course the Hojo are basically forced to submit. Their leadership commit suicide, and basically all their land is taken away. And this is often pointed to as one of the dumbest decisions made during the Sengoku period. And it is pretty, there's not a lot of choice, there's not a lot of options here. There's not a different outcome that's really likely. It did seem that, resisting as the Hojo did meant certain doom. And the only way I can really explain it is a loss of autonomy, a loss of independence. Because, when you're faced with these two options, which is submit or, be obliterated, to submit really means giving up, your own agency to act as a warlord, as an independent warlord, and shape your own future. And a lot of these clans, like the Mori, for instance, had already sort of embraced holding on to what they already had. But the Hojo, I guess for whatever reason, decided that they would rather roll the dice and take their chances and risk losing everything, which is what happened. And if you compare that to some other decisions, like, I mean, I can only help but think of Oda Nobunaga's decision in 1560 to ride out against the Imagawa against insurmountable odds and come out on top. I mean, we'd probably think that was a pretty stupid decision if, the Oda forces had lost. But as it happens, we think of it as this momentous occasion where Oda Nobunaga really rose above sort of the odds and became this unifying force, the future, the first of the Great Unifiers in Sengoku period. So, I can't say that it was a great decision by the Hojo to resist, to hold up in Odawara Castle. But at the same time, when you compare it to sort of what the stakes were, which is, hold on to your little corner and just be happy with that, or to refuse to compromise and fight until the end, they went out in I won't say a blaze of glory, because there wasn't that much glorious about a siege, but, they went out on their own terms, put it that way, and leave it at that. But basically their lands are reallocated to Ieyasu. He does contribute in this fight. He does send troops to fight at Odawara. And basically Hideyoshi strikes a deal with him, which is that I will give you all this land that belongs to the Hojo and the Kanto, but you have to move out there to the east and give up your traditional power base in Mikawa, which is closer to central Japan. And of course, Hideyoshi has the strategy or the plan here to isolate the Tokugawa and, force them onto the sort of the periphery of, the Japanese geographically. But really what this, fails to do is isolate Tokugawa Ieyasu politically. He may be out now in Edo, modern Tokyo in eastern Japan, but he's still a political force. He still has lots of connections and allies. And he's considered one of the main sort of the big names, the big daimyo, up until the death of Hideyoshi in 1598. So he doesn't go away. And, I think this really kind of gets to the biggest weakness, I think, that Hideyoshi shows with this federation arrangement of his, is that he kind of prolongs the inevitable. Instead of, just wiping out his enemies, who's really Ieyasu is the biggest one of those. He kind of, reaches a settlement or a compromise. He appeases his rivals rather than trying to destroy them. And in a way, this really makes unification a whole lot easier. Mary Berry, in her biography of Hideyoshi, kind of stresses the climate of fear that Nobunaga had created and how Hideyoshi benefited from that by reaching settlements, extending the olive branch. But there's a lot to be said for how efficient the Nobunaga's methods were, however ruthless they were. Because, really when he destroyed a rival, there was no way that his rival could come back at him. But when Hideyoshi creates this federation of daimyo, he definitely leaves the door open for a coalition, or even really just one figure to lead a coalition against him and his family. And he made some really dumb decisions when it comes to his successor, but I'll get to that in the next video. So I just want to finish up by saying some more of the domestic accomplishments that Hideyoshi did. He builds up Osaka Castle. Ishiyama Temple had been a huge complex used by the Iko-Iki to resist Nobunaga. After they're finally besieged and destroyed, Hideyoshi built Osaka Castle. It's sort of his answer to Azuchi, which was Nobunaga's grand castle. Hideyoshi is a patron of tea ceremonies. He also becomes very interested in no plays. He performs for the emperor. He encourages other daimyo to perform with him in his, reenactments of no plays. He has poetry readings, and all of this goes to show like he's interested in presenting himself as a man of culture, as a man of refinement, which I think he was basically compensating for what his origins were. And I don't mean just his origins in terms of being a peasant, but also as a warlord. This is a man who was not born into any prestigious family. He doesn't have a large clan and power base to support him. All of the legitimacy, all of the following that he has comes from himself. It's very, if you want to talk about personalistic regimes, this is, the definition of it, because, the Tokugawa, the Oda, any other clan you can name, they have a family, they have a power base they can fall back on. Hideyoshi has none of that. He's clawed his way to the top of his own, he's used the Oda clan as a springboard for establishing his own thing, but his thing is very much built on shifting sands. And I think, the no plays, the tea ceremonies, all the culture that he shows, I think part of it is just as a way to socialize and integrate himself into court life, into the life of these highborn samurai, and to try to win them over. And I think that's also part of his strengths, playing to his strengths, which is that he was a much more charismatic figure. He was much more inclined to try to charm people. He was loved to drink, loved to party, loved to chase the ladies around. He was very much an extroverted personality, and I think he was trying to use that to his benefit, try to win friends. And while he lived, there was never any move against him. But as soon as he died, the absence of him and his particular skills from the scene, along with him leaving behind a very young child as his heir, really created a basis for Ieyasu to move in. Except Ieyasu even waits a little while, a few more years, until Maeda Toshie dies before he actually makes his move at Sekigahara. So I'm going to wrap it up here. In my next video, I'm going to talk about Hideyoshi's decision to invade Korea, or rather to invade and conquer China by way of invading and conquering Korea. He doesn't make it past Korea, though, spoiler alert. And his issues with selecting an heir, first going from his nephew Hidetsugu to his son Hideyori, and how that doesn't really work out for him and the Toyotomi clan in the long run. So I will see you hopefully very soon with the last and final video of the Hideyoshi series, and then it's on to the Ieyasu series, which may be shorter than the 3 videos in a row that I've been doing for Nobunaga and Hideyoshi. Just because I feel like his story is so wrapped up in Nobunaga and then Hideyoshi's story. I'm not sure how much I can really cover in those last few years where he's the top dog after Sekigahara. But we'll see how that goes. There might be more to him worth going into. But until then, I'll see you later. Have a great day, and samurai history is just really cool. That's all there is to it.